lied and used fake documents to obtain the interview with my mother, made lurid and false claims about the royal family, which played on her fears and fueled paranoia.
What if your mother wrote you a letter, knowing the entire world might one day read it? Now imagine that mother was Princess Diana. Hidden for decades, a lost letter has resurfaced, revealing not only her deepest fears, but her fiercest hopes for her son. This wasn't just a note, it was a legacy. And the timing of its discovery? Uncanny. Why did Diana write it? What truths about Prince William's future did she predict? And how does this one letter reshape everything we thought we knew about the royal family? Let's unfold the lost words of the people's princess, line by line, emotion by emotion. It began with a quiet listing in a London auction house, no fanfare, no headlines, just ink on paper, tucked into a album surrounded by dusty heirlooms and forgotten family keepsakes. Yet among the mundane, something extraordinary stirred. A name leapt from the page like a whisper in a thunderstorm. Diana, Princess of Wales. In July 2004, 7 years after her death shocked the globe, a collection of her personal letters appeared for sale. These were not official documents bound by protocol or polished for press releases. These were handwritten notes, emotional, untamed, personal, and one, in particular, pierced through the silence a letter addressed with raw, maternal devotion to her eldest son, Prince William. There was no royal seal, no palace preface, just Diana's unmistakable, curvy, elegant, looping, filled with urgency. The letter had been penned not for history, but for the heart. It was never meant for public consumption. Yet here it was, exposed to the highest bidder, laying bare a side of the people's princess that no camera ever caught. The paper, though, aged, pulsed with the rhythm of a mother's love and fear. This wasn't the Diana seen on glossy magazine covers or in carefully curated interviews. This was the real Diana, unfiltered, undone, and deeply human. The recipient? Violet Collison. Not a diplomat, not a royal advisor, but the Spencer family's longtime housekeeper. A woman who had witnessed Diana's transformation from shy teenager to global icon. Violet was more than staff. She was sanctuary. And to her, Diana entrusted some of her most vulnerable reflections. It was through this lens that the letter emerged, casting a new, more intimate light on a woman already steeped in public mythology. In it, Diana speaks of William not as a future king, but as her son. Her boy, the one she watched grow behind palace walls and in the shadows of relentless cameras. The discovery of this letter ignited a firestorm of interest, not because it was scandalous, but because it was sacred. Every word peeled back another layer of a mother navigating life under scrutiny, raising her children amid cold tradition and colder headlines. Diana had long been a symbol of compassion, but this handwritten legacy revealed the quiet strength behind her softness. A woman who knew she wouldn't always be there, and who chose ink to carry the weight of love she could no longer speak aloud. Royal watchers, historians, even skeptics couldn't look away. This wasn't just a relic, it was a revelation. It stirred the collective memory of a world that still mourned her and questioned the institution that failed to protect her. Most of all, it posed a question far more haunting than the contents of the letter itself. Why did she write it at all? What fears had driven her to put pen to paper with such purpose? But what was inside that letter? And why was Diana's voice still so loud, even from the grave? Princesses weren't supposed to drop their kids off at nursery or sneak them into McDonald's. But Diana wasn't interested in being a traditional princess. She was determined to be something far more radical, a real mother. In a palace where protocol ruled over personal instinct and children were often handed off to nannies like heirlooms, Diana tore up the rulebook and wrote her own version of motherhood. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't wait for approval. From the very beginning, she chose to raise her sons not as future monarchs, molded by centuries of rigidity, but as boys who deserved a childhood filled with love, normality, and emotional truth. And that choice shook the foundations of the royal institution. She didn't just pose for photos on school steps. She was there, in the drop-off line, walking alongside other parents. She sat at the edge of beds, read bedtime stories, and attended school events, not as a royal figure, but as a mom who wanted her sons to feel safe in her presence. These weren't symbolic gestures. They were acts of rebellion wrapped in tenderness. And they sent a message loud enough to echo through the gates of Buckingham Palace. Diana wasn't raising symbols, she was raising sons. She breastfed William herself, breaking a tradition long held by royal mothers who had left such tasks to wet nurses. She handpicked her sons' names, refusing to let aristocratic custom overshadow her maternal instinct. She chose a nursery, school near Kensington Palace instead of relying on palace-appointed tutors, ensuring her children grew up around ordinary kids, not just courtiers. Diana wanted her boys to know the world beyond the walls they were born behind, and she made sure they saw it. Public buses, amusement parks, fast food counters. Diana led William and Harry through a world the monarchy had spent centuries avoiding. She wasn't seeking headlines or crafting photo ops. She was showing them life, unfiltered and unguarded. She believed that a future king couldn't rule with understanding unless he first saw the struggles of those he might one day lead. So she showed them. People who were ignored. People who were hurting. And in those lessons, she planted seeds of empathy that would later shape both boys, but especially William. It wasn't about rebellion for the sake of headlines. It was about love without barriers. She showed affection not with ceremonial waves, but with hugs in public, handwritten notes tucked into lunchboxes, and whispered reassurances during moments of chaos. Her parenting was intentional, fiercely emotional, and in a monarchy that often confused duty with distance, Diana's presence was a silent revolution. It wasn't loud, it wasn't showy, but it was powerful. And while the world saw a royal mother, her boys saw something else entirely, an emotional lifeline. These weren't just letters, they were emotional time capsules, each one preserved not for display, but for devotion. Quietly, tucked away in drawers, passed between trusted hands, and written in ink that carried more weight than any royal decree. Diana didn't need to shout her truth. She wrote it, to staff, to friends, to people who had earned her confidence and who saw her not as a public figure but as a mother fighting a silent war against a system that too often forgot children had hearts, not just titles. Her letters were layered with more than just updates. They were overflowing with unspoken fears, maternal pride, and a relentless desire to give her sons what the palace never could: emotional shelter. One such note, seemingly simple, was sent to Sergeant George Plum of the Special Escort Group. On the surface, it was a thank you for organizing a motorbike display for William's 7th birthday. But look closer, and it revealed much more. It was signed not just by Diana, but by William and Harry, too. Their young, clumsy signatures scrawled beside hers, transforming the note into something far more intimate. It wasn't royal correspondence. It was a snapshot of joy, a mother capturing a fleeting moment of happiness in the storm of royal obligation. That letter, written on official Kensington Palace stationery, became one of many that blurred the line between duty and devotion, because for Diana, they were never truly separate. As time went on, the tone of her letters shifted. Gone was the light-hearted voice of a bride-to-be navigating royal chaos. In its place came a woman growing more protective, more deliberate. The words became thicker with concern, edged with an urgency only a mother could understand. Gratitude still flowed from her pen, but now it was paired with guarded hope and an unmistakable undercurrent of fear. Diana knew the world she was raising her sons in, and through these letters, she left a trail of quiet resistance, a maternal voice pushing back against centuries of cold tradition. Each line she wrote gave the public something they had never truly seen: Diana's unfiltered heart. No cameras, no stage-managed moments, just her voice calm, measured, but firm, laying bare the impossible balance between royal image and real emotion. Her words weren't designed to dazzle. They were meant to protect. Every expression of thanks, every story of school day giggles or birthday joy, was a shield she crafted carefully, lovingly, and intentionally. Her sons would grow up in a world that didn't allow softness from kings. So she gave them strength in the only way she knew how, by writing down her love, her lessons, and her fears, in a way that would outlive even her own voice. Because those letters weren't meant to end. They were meant to echo, not just through the halls of Kensington Palace, but through the very men her boys would become. But Diana's mission went beyond bedtime stories and thank you notes. She was building antikyphi armor for her sons. Behind closed palace doors, Diana wasn't just raising children, she was waging war. Not the kind fought with swords or scandal, but a quieter, more dangerous kind. A war against tradition, against expectation, against a system built to suffocate individuality in favor of image. From the moment she became a mother, Diana knew she was entering enemy territory. The palace had long been a fortress of protocol, where parenting was delegated and emotion was managed like a press release. But Diana refused to follow the script. She was not raising heirs to serve the crown. She was raising boys, her boys, and she would not allow them to be swallowed whole by the machine that nearly devoured her. She made her stand in small, deliberate moves. She ignored advisors who insisted William and Harry be shielded from the public and instead orchestrated carefully calculated photo opportunities. But these weren't vanity plays, they were strategic strikes. If she gave the press just enough, she could buy privacy. It was a brutal negotiation, one she handled herself, often alone. Because Diana knew the press wouldn't back off, but maybe she could manage the chaos, so her sons wouldn't have to grow up under the same suffocating spotlight that followed her every breath. These deals with the media weren't weakness. They were armor, and she wore it for them, but the toll was merciless. For every photo op she allowed, the cameras found 10 more unauthorized shots. Every attempt at control revealed how little control she really had. And still, she kept fighting. Because Diana had seen what the press could do. She had watched it shred her dignity in headlines, invent stories to feed the public's hunger, and twist moments of truth into scandal. She knew what it felt like to lose yourself in a version of your life you no longer recognized. And she feared more than anything that William would one day feel the same. So she wrote letters, begged for privacy, and taught her sons to smile at the lens while shielding their hearts behind it. The world saw a woman with perfect posture and elegant dresses, but her letters told a different story of tension, anxiety, and an unending war for her children's peace of mind. Public Diana smiled through charity galas and official tours. Private Diana wept into pillows and scribbled fears onto stationery late at night. Her rebellion wasn't loud. It wasn't tabloid-worthy. It was measured, relentless, and full of love. She didn't burn the system down. She subverted it with compassion. And in doing so, she redefined what it meant to be royal, not through duty, but through devotion. Every bedtime story told in secret, every school run dodging paparazzi, every handwritten note was part of a larger mission, to protect what the monarchy was never built to nurture: childhood, humanity, freedom. And when her marriage began to fall apart, her focus on William only grew fiercer. As the royal marriage cracked, Diana doubled down on motherhood. While headlines obsessed over rumors and scandals, she retreated into the one role she would never surrender: being a mother. In 1992, when her separation from Prince Charles became official, the palace spun it with polished statements. But behind the scenes, Diana was building a new fortress, one not made of marble or gold, but of presence, affection, and emotional grit. The institution may have been falling apart around her, but in her sons' lives, she was unshakable. She didn't flinch. Instead, she poured every ounce of herself into raising William and Harry with a foundation that protocol could never provide. She personally helped choose their schools, not based on legacy or prestige, but on something the royal family rarely prioritized: emotional well-being. She wanted environments that nurtured more than intellect. Diana was searching for spaces that respected kindness, creativity, and vulnerability. She made sure their teachers saw her as a partner, not a distant royal. Her involvement was constant, thoughtful, and deeply personal. Birthday notes sent to staff, handwritten messages filled with warmth and thanks. She remembered names, details, emotions. These weren't royal gestures, they were signs of a mother who saw everyone around her, children as part of their emotional world. And she made it her mission to keep that world intact. But beneath that steady devotion, fear simmered. Her letters from this period reveal a woman bracing for the unknown. She didn't know what the future would bring, only that the monarchy's grip was tightening around her sons, and that she had limited time to shape the men they'd become. She poured those fears into ink, confiding in staff, friends, anyone she trusted, often more honest on paper than she could be in public. Diana had learned that love wasn't always enough to protect them, but it was the most powerful thing she had left. The loss of her Royal Highness title cut deep, not for status, but for what it symbolized. It meant she would have to curtsy to her own children. The crown had stripped her of her place, but not in their hearts. And it was William, barely, a teenager, who offered her comfort. "Don't worry, Mummy. I'll give it back to you one day when I'm king." Whether he said it or not hardly matters anymore. What matters is the bond that made such a promise even possible. In Diana's world, strength didn't mean power. It meant compassion. She was raising a future king, but she wanted him to rule with his heart, not just his head. But even as she lost her royal titles, Diana's emotional influence only deepened. Diana's parenting wasn't about duty, it was about depth, while others groomed their heirs for the throne with tradition, titles, and tightly controlled appearances. Diana gave her sons something far more valuable: a soul. She didn't want William to grow up wearing a crown with a cold heart. She wanted him to feel, to listen, to notice, to understand the pain behind people's eyes. Her vision for him was never to rule above others, but to walk beside them. She believed power without empathy was nothing more than a performance. So, from the start, she raised a boy who would one day be a king, but first and foremost, a man of compassion. She introduced William not to courtiers, but to the forgotten. She took him by the hand and walked him into homeless shelters, hospitals, and spaces where privilege didn't exist. These weren't royal visits with cameras flashing, these were quiet, deliberate moments of truth. At Centerpoint, a charity helping homeless youth, William saw teenagers barely older than himself, living without families, food, or safety. And Diana didn't shield him from that reality. She wanted him to see it, because in her eyes, a future king had no business leading a nation if he couldn't understand its deepest wounds. She taught him that leadership wasn't about waving from balconies or reading polished speeches. It was about service, about showing up for people when no one else would. She told him again and again that feelings weren't weakness. They were the most powerful tool he had. She didn't want him to bury his emotions beneath a polished exterior like so many in the royal lineage before him. She wanted him to hold on to them, to lead with heart, not just heritage. And she modeled it every day. In her touch, in her tears, in her relentless refusal to be anything other than human in a system that demanded perfection. Diana wasn't interested in raising a prince who obeyed. She was crafting a leader who understood, and the impact of her choices would ripple far beyond her lifetime. Years later, as William began choosing his own causes, her influence was unmistakable. From mental health campaigns to housing initiatives, he carried her voice like a compass. Quiet, but always present. She hadn't just taught him how to navigate a broken institution, she taught him how to soften it, how to change it. And as Diana's life began shifting toward a new phase, she was more focused than ever on her son's future. Diana had finally found freedom, but it came wrapped in risk. By 1997, she was no longer a working royal. The titles were gone, the official duties stripped away. But in their place, something even more powerful had begun to bloom: independence. She was no longer tethered to a monarchy that had tried to mold her. For the first time, her choices were hers alone. And she used that freedom with purpose. She stepped away from the spectacle and turned toward what truly mattered: people. The forgotten, the hurting, the voiceless. She no longer moved with the crown. She moved with conviction. But even as she appeared more radiant to the public eye, behind that glow lived a woman who was still guarded, still careful, and still tethered to a responsibility far greater than any royal duty: her sons. Her calendar may have been filled with international charity work and high-profile campaigns, but her heart never strayed far from William and Harry. She called them constantly, checked in on their routines, rearranged her travel to align with their school breaks. Her letters during this time carry a tone that's unmistakable, hopeful. Yes, but lined with hesitation. It was as though she sensed how delicate this new chapter truly was. She had stepped out of the palace gates, but the shadows still lingered. And in every written word, there was a recurring theme: protect the boys. From the cameras, from the system, from what she had endured. She spoke often of reshaping her public identity. She didn't want to be remembered as the scorned wife or the tragic princess. She wanted to be known as a mother, a humanitarian, a woman who led with empathy in a world that glorified image over integrity. In private, she began quietly planning a new foundation, one that would reflect her values, her causes, and, most importantly, her maternal mission. It wasn't about glory. It was about legacy. Diana wasn't just thinking about her name, she was thinking about what William and Harry would inherit, beyond the crown. She wanted to leave them something real, something human. Those final months were filled with clarity. She wasn't chasing headlines anymore. She was building something lasting. And though the press focused on her love life and vacations, the truth was far more profound. Diana had begun to heal. And in that healing, she had grown more fearless, but also more exposed. Her time was no longer divided by royal calendars. She had become her own force. But freedom has a cost. And Diana knew that. Her letters from this period aren't filled with fear, but with caution. She was walking a tightrope between liberation and danger. And then, on one dark night in Paris, it all stopped, leaving only her words behind. Diana may be gone, but her words live on through the man she raised. Though Prince William rarely speaks publicly about his mother, her influence is etched into everything he does. It's in the way he speaks to people not above them, but with them. It's in his deliberate choices to step away from royal stiffness and move towards something warmer, more human. While others inherited titles, William inherited something far more powerful. A blueprint for empathy, sketched by a mother who knew her time was short. And now, the world sees it every time he champions a cause that speaks not to power, but to pain. In 2016, when William helped launch the Heads Together campaign, it marked a seismic shift in royal tradition. Here was a future king speaking about grief, mental health, and vulnerability. And not just for others, but for himself. It was a move the monarchy would have once called scandalous. But for William, it was second nature. Because Diana had always told him, feel, don't bury, speak, don't suffer in silence. The campaign was not just a gesture, it was a continuation, an echo of his mother's voice, repackaged for a new generation. Years later, with the launch of Homewards, William again returned to Diana's deepest convictions. The project aimed to end homelessness, not as a headline-grabbing royal venture, but as a community-led mission. The connection was unmistakable. Decades earlier, Diana had walked the same path, sat beside the same displaced souls, and brought light to the same forgotten corners of society. William didn't just inherit her name, he inherited her calling, and he's answering it, not with fanfare, but with fierce intention. That rediscovered letter, the one unearthed from the shadows of a London auction, was never meant for the world. But today, it reads like a map, a guide, a warning, a prayer. It shows a mother preparing her son for a world that would demand too much of him, too early. And somehow, it also shows her triumph. Because William didn't just survive it, he absorbed it. Her compassion, her courage, her defiance. It all lives in him now. Diana didn't just write letters, she wrote William's foundation. And through him, her voice is still heard. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.